All right, and welcome into Speaking Sports. I'm your host, Razorback Dave. Today on the show, my buddy JR from Georgia. He's going to come rub my nose in it a little bit, and we're going to talk about their future, talk about the future of what happens to the SEC teams in the playoff, and then how good is the Big Ten? Stay with us. All right, welcome into the Speaking Sports Studios, powered by Avcare RNS, high atop the Avcare building in Pulaski, Tennessee. And I'm on here with my buddy JR. Buddy, how you doing after you just brought my hogs into Athens and kicked our tails and threw us back on the bus upside down and sent us home?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Obviously, it's great to get a win of that caliber. I feel bad for some of my buddies who, like you, who are Razorback fans, but then again, I don't feel that bad because we got the win.
I would not have felt bad for you in the least had we won that game. But having said that, I mean, you guys really, it looks like you guys are that good. And make no mistake, we went in there and laid an egg, 2 false start penalties on the first possession, but we did get backed up into the student section to start the game off. It just went downhill from there. So, you know, no excuses. I think we're a better team than that maybe, but I don't think it would have mattered if we'd have played our best the way you guys played Saturday. I don't think it would have mattered.
Yeah, you know, the crowd noise definitely, I think, a huge factor for Arkansas on Saturday. The penalties, I think it was 101 penalties. I mean, that's a whole football field given up, you know?
It was 13 of them. I can tell you that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was 100 or 101 yards maybe on it. So a lot of penalties. And you may be right. Had they played a cleaner game, Georgia may have still won that game. But Arkansas needs to clean some of that stuff up moving forward, or it's going to be hard to win. You know?
Yeah, it's probably growing pains for them. But you guys were like averaging 6'6", 6'7" across both the lines. 325 to 350 really pushed us around from the very beginning. And I guess I don't. Why didn't you push Clemson around like that? Because they're clearly not very good either.
I don't have an answer to that question of why we didn't do as well against Clemson.
I didn't put that on my list, did I?
Yeah, no, you put it on the list. But it didn't matter. I wouldn't have had an answer anyway. I don't know why we didn't push Clemson around. And I was scared after that Clemson game. I didn't know whether 2 really national championship teams were squaring off or if we were 2 bad teams squaring off. But it looks like Clemson slipped a little farther down, of course, than we have. And asking about, defense, offense, moving them around. On the D-line, you got Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt. And Jordan Davis is, I don't know, what he's 6'5", 6'6", 300-plus pounds, and he's fast. So when he gets through and gets back there, it doesn't matter that the quarterback takes off running and scrambles. The guy can really, really move. So he tracks down and makes him make mistakes. And I think that's a huge, huge asset for Georgia right now.
So you got a big game coming up this week. I don't happen to think it's against a very good opponent, but you did intimate to me that if we get through this game without losing, I thought, get through this game without losing. I mean, it's not like Alabama's coming to town. Well, what's the scoop on that?
Yeah, Dave, I think I heard you use the term describe us Georgia fans, and you're not wrong, by the way, we're poor mouth a lot, And I mentioned that to my wife. I said, Dave said this, and she said, well, Dave's not wrong. We do poor mouth. That happens. But it's because we've been down this road so many times and expected something to happen and got let down. So I think –
Not like me.
The phrase I'd used the last time we spoke was not to buy into hype and hope and just really play one game at a time. And right now it's one game at a time. The next opponent is Auburn. I really feel like, not just as a fan, of course, the team preps that way too. That's the only thing they can be focused on right now. Not looking down the road. You look down the road, that's when that game sneaks up on you.
Okay, well, Georgia has 5 more 5-star athletes than Alabama. So if I'm sitting here, I don't even think Arkansas has a 5-star athlete. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, I had 3. It would still be less than Alabama. You have 5 more. Height and hope would be at the top of my list.
I guess if I
don't know about your poor mouthers. I'm just going to go ahead and say it right here on the air. You're poor mouthers.
I'll take that. But if I don't expect too much, I won't be too let down if something goes wrong. But you talked about having 5-star players. we're really hurting at wide receiver right now. We've got not just starting QB, obviously day to day with the lat injury. You've got, I think it's 4 wide receivers, and Jack St. Blaylock, Smith, and then of course the big one, George Pickens, and he's labeled as out. The other ones are questionable, and they did just move from out to questionable, which is great. But you talked about having more 5 stars. We've also, I feel like, got a lot more injuries. I think health is really hurting us right now, and we have other injuries as well. But those at the receiver slot, we can't stay one dimensional and expect to keep winning. At some point, we've got to have deep threat down the field.
I don't disagree with that at all. But who's the opponent this week? Have you said? Did I miss it?
It's the Auburn Tigers.
Okay, so but against Auburn now. I'm not going to say it couldn't be a trap game. I'm not saying if you come in there with the attitude that I would have, was I on the Georgia team? Yeah, you could probably get beat. But with the attitude, I don't get the impression that Georgia plays a lot on emotion. I really thought they played on emotion a little bit early in that first quarter, but once they figured out that we were kind of a paper tiger, at least on Saturday, they all settled down. They got a little sloppy. They scored a bunch of points in the first 20, 25 minutes of the game, and then they didn't score a lot the rest of the game. They let our defense adjust a little bit. And yeah, if you go in there and let down against anybody in this league, you're gonna get beat. But I still think that this week you probably, unless you let down, it's much mental as it is anything else. And I've talked about this on the show with other people. You and I go and watch the game on Saturdays. And if you're like me, you watch all the press conferences and you're probably on a message board and, you talk about it with somebody all week about what's Georgia going to do and what's Arkansas going to do. But you really don't ever stop to think about what is on the mind of the athlete or the coach that doesn't concern football. And what I mean is you have a job and you do it very well. And but on some occasions, things that are happening around you affect your performance on that job. It can, if you're not wary of it. And even if you are wary of it, sometimes it just sneaks up on you. We don't ever stop to think about that on these athletes. They're young, 18 to 24-year-old athletes. They're impressionable. They like to swim towards the shiny object. Have you ever thought about that? And
yeah, that is a task for every coaching staff, and not just the coaches, but all the support staff they have that you don't see the head coach of this or this line coach of that line. There's a ton of coordinators and analysts and support staff that go along with that to move the team, just to be able to move the operation. And I think part of that whole group's overall goal is steering these young athletes and dealing with any adversity that they have and trying to teach to, kind of check that at the door. They've got to leave that just like we do when we, if we go into big meetings or we have something we have to go to, whatever's bothering you in your life, you have to check at the door, get through what you got to get through, and then you can get back to your personal life. So, yeah, everybody has things they struggle with. I'm sure our players have plenty of things, and our coaches as well. They have to turn that off. And, that's a tough thing for any team to deal with. I think we do a good job of it, but then again, I don't really have any idea what our players are struggling with or what our coaches are struggling with.
Well, it's the job of the fan. It's the fan's job to consider that. When you're on a radio show poor mouthing about your 5th-team running back because your 3 5-stars are stayed out too late on Friday night. Yeah, he's a little over the edge. I don't know. I watch these games, and you go out there and the kickers are probably the worst. There's so much pressure on the kicker. He goes out there and he's made 20 in a row, and then he lets the TV announcers talk him out of one, and he walks away. And then my thought is, you had one job. You had one job. You don't do anything all week but kick the ball. That's it. You kick the ball.
And people watching at home, grandpa and 10-year-olds, they think that 25-yard shot is a chip shot. They could make that shot if they were up there. And it's harder than it looks.
I'll walk down on the field and see how close those uprights are from 40 yards.
Since I'm a teenager since I've tried to kick a ball through the uprights, and I can tell you it's a lot harder than it looks.
I can do it, but I do it like Bill McClard. That like it's straight on with the toe shoe. You know, I can't come from the side. That makes no sense to me.
I never could.
I don't get it.
I wasn't a great kicker. That's why I was a defensive back.
So while we're on Georgia and Arkansas, real quick, we took your offensive line coach, probably one of the best offensive line coaches in the country, in Sam Pittman, great recruiter, as we got a chance to see from the three of the guys you guys had on the offensive line. He recruited and developed, and he's just now getting to where he's getting his offensive line stereotypes in now. They're actually going to get to play this week. He'd been holding them their true freshmen. A lot of people made fun of Arkansas for hiring Sam Pittman to the head job right off of a coordinator position, not having been a head coach in a lot of years since he was at Jacksonville State or something like that. But you guys were closer to him and valued him a little bit more than that. Talk about that just a little bit.
You know, he was part of that 17 season. Dogs won 13 games that year. SEC championship was the first appearance in the college football playoff. And a lot of that, I think, is attributed to a coach like that on the staff. So I can't say anything but good at this point about him. I didn't follow him that closely as a coach at the time, nor have I really since then. I just know how well the team did at that time. And I would say, everybody's got to start somewhere. Just because you don't have a previous job as a head coach at a D1 school doesn't mean you can't come in. I mean, the guy's not brand new. This isn't his first. You didn't hire somebody that was the first day on the job ever coaching any kind of football. So I would say, sit back and continue to watch. And obviously, Arkansas is playing well. And I think the offensive line, could they be doing better? Could Arkansas be doing better? I would say not as much. We look at this performance against Georgia, and I know you fell flat there, but looking back at the first part of the season, I think Arkansas is playing pretty well. There's not any improvement to be had, but to answer your overall question, I like the guy, and I don't think it's a bad decision to make him head coach thus far. What are your thoughts, Dave?
I think some of the fans were calling him Georgia's water boy. Well, of the four guys that got hired that year, Drinkwitz to Missouri, Lane Kiffin to Ole Miss, and Mike Leach to Mississippi State. Those were the other three.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, Pittman's having the most success, not maybe on a one-loss basis, but for Arkansas, it was more about culture. And I have always said that the only guy that's going to be successful, it may be every job, but especially in Arkansas, the only guy that's going to be successful there is the guy that really wants to be there. You go back and look at the football coaches in history at Arkansas that wanted to be there: Frank Broyles, Kenny Hatfield, Houston Nutt, and now Sam Pittman. He really wanted to be there. He loved his time in Fayetteville. He talked about how when he took the job at Georgia as the offensive line coach at Georgia, his wife didn't speak to him for a year because they left the job at Arkansas to take that job at Georgia. He got a chance to go down there. I don't know if he saw eye to eye with Brett Bielema and how he was running that team. He clearly runs it different. He can talk in this tone of voice that I'm in right now, and he can be reading you the riot act or telling you how great you are, and it doesn't change. And these kids respond to that. He's changed the culture. He's a guy that says, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, and I'm going to write it down. So if he writes it down on a sheet of paper, they believe it. I mean, they just believe everything that he tells them. And I'm not sure he went in last week and told them that they could beat Georgia, because I didn't see anybody all week or after the game that thought they could beat Georgia. So, might need to work on that just a little bit, but we'll see. Okay, we're talking to JR about some SEC football. We're going to take a quick break. KRT Heat. Watch this message. We'll be right back. You're listening to Speaking Sports. I'm Razorback Dave. All right, everyone from athletes to weekend warriors sometimes catch a cramp when they're competing or working out. When you need relief fast, you want to reach for KRT Relief Cream. Just rub a little where it hurts, and KRT's patented technology works quickly to calm the nerves that are causing the cramps. KRT comes in cream or gel and works great for everyone. So go to krtrelief.com and enter promo code SNS20. That's SNS20 to receive 20% off your first KRT order. That's www.krtrelief.com. All right, SNS 20 is your code, krtrelief.com. Help the show out. Help yourself out. That stuff works. I use it all the time. Welcome back into Speaking Sports. I'm Razorback Dave. I'm with my buddy JR from Athens, Georgia, but he actually lives on the beach. We're not going to talk about that because every time I think about that, I don't want to talk to him anymore. So we'll just let that go right on by. But JR, so we were talking about Georgia. So here's what I want to get a little bit deeper into the SEC. Alabama's clearly as good as advertised. Georgia's clearly as good as advertised. They're on a collision course for the end of the season, barring any unforeseen poor mouthing. If they both make it to the SEC championship game undefeated, and clearly they'll be 1 and 2 in the nation at that point, does the loser make the playoff? It can be an if. You tell me what you think, and I'll tell you what I think.
Give you the ifs. I think if you've got a one-loss Alabama or a one-loss Georgia at that point, and you've got other conference champions that are undefeated, I don't think the one-loss SEC team should go and play at that point. My biggest thing is we didn't win our conference. And I know a lot of people may say, well, yeah, but it's the SEC and you played Alabama or you played Georgia. Should you get another shot? Depending on how many other teams are involved at that time and what their records are, I would say probably not. But they could.
Well, okay, but if they're so, let's just take Cincinnati, for instance. They're undefeated. They got a quality win over Notre Dame last weekend. They roll in undefeated. Oklahoma rolls in undefeated. Alabama or Georgia, let's say Georgia wins and Alabama. I'm going to say if Georgia wins that game and Alabama's the one-loss team, Alabama's in. And if it's the other way around, it's going to depend on the margin of victory for Alabama. That's how, because I heard somebody put it very interestingly and then put it like this and then said, oh, this is not happening, but this is what it would be called. But they're branding the games. They're going to brand the playoff in that they're going to take the teams with the more popular brand and they want them in there for the coverage. So I think Alabama wins the brand contest. So they may be the only one of the two of them that could go in with a loss and be in the playoff. But what do you do about if Cincinnati is so much better than Georgia or Alabama? Why aren't they in number 3? And then you start getting into one-loss teams. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, it's Cincinnati and Oregon and Alabama. No, it would have to be. Cincinnati, Oregon, Oklahoma, and the winner of the SEC championship game. Are those the only 4 people in the playoff? That leaves Ohio State out. That leaves Notre Dame out, which sends those TV people right over the edge. Because I'm going to tell you, if you held a gun on anybody at a television network and asked them, do you want Cincinnati in the playoff? They're going to say, no.
Yeah, you got 2 different things going on here. You've got what do we think is deserving as fans, what teams deserve to play, and then you've got a big moneymaker TV operation going on that wants advertisements and viewers to make money. So those 2 things conflict at some point, and this is the point where they strongly conflict. So, they have the money, and if there's any influence there on who decides who will be in there, then that would be a big factor. I think if you left it up to fans, they probably wouldn't want 2 SEC teams in the playoffs. I think get outside the SEC, and I think that's a sore spot for a lot of other fans in other conferences. And I can understand why they feel that way.
So I always contend that one of the reasons they don't actually just take all those high branded schools and form their own league is that they need the fans of the other teams to make the money. Because if they just got 20 or 30 teams that all they do is play each other all the time, like the NFL, I don't think they're going to get coast to coast popularity like they have doing it like they're doing it, because teams like mine or even the FBS schools like Tulsa or Texas San Antonio or Arizona State, some of those schools that would not be considered in the top 30, let's say it was 30. Those fans matter because anytime the schools in those top 30 come to town, for a split second, we all think we have a chance to beat them. And on any given day, we can and we do. But at the point where the other 90 schools don't care what those top 30 are doing, I think they lose their popularity. So having said that, do you think that what the fans think matters? Because for me, if they cut Cincinnati, I'm not a Cincinnati fan. I don't even care. But I like the Cinderella story in the basketball tournament. And Cincinnati would be a Cinderella story, I think. But and then just barely because of the win over Notre Dame. But that would be TV's fault because they anoint Notre Dame every year in the top 5 or 10 until they lose a couple of games. But they're up there to start with it. And that's a whole nother show. But they do it. It's the branding. Branding is the word. Danny Cannell, not a fan, but he said it on his show this morning. It's branding. And that's what they're doing in the polls. That's what they're doing in the playoffs. And I don't like it so much. But I think here's the thing. How you feel about expanding the playoff? Because I think this method that they're using to brand the 14 playoff is going to be the dissension that leads us to an expanded playoff, simply because what you just said. And we were going to talk about this. We can talk about it now. Ohio State, somebody said, if Ohio State finishes the season unscathed and takes that one loss, they're in the playoff. Well, they would be in the playoff at the expense of either the SEC runner-up with one loss, an undefeated Oklahoma team, Oregon, or an undefeated Cincinnati team. So that's 5 teams for 3 spots. But if they decided to brand the top 4, Ohio State's probably in there at least over Cincinnati. And then it would come down to a popularity contest between Georgia and Ohio State, or Alabama and Ohio State, with the loss. And I think that dissension is what's going to ultimately lead us to an expanded playoff. I think 12 teams is too many, but 8 is palatable.
Yeah. Before we ever went to a playoff, those of us who were an advocate of a playoff in college football, I was not a fan of the idea of just 4 teams because I thought it eliminated too many potential teams to win in there. And, the 8, 12, 16 scenario was much more plausible to me. The problem that I think really capped that was that you'd have to go back to a smaller season. You'd have to go back to a 10-game season to make room for a really expanded playoff. And, now we're talking about cutting into 2 games that would be on TV and 2 times that stadiums would sell out and sell tickets, and those local communities selling out their hotels and their restaurants, doing extra business and all those things that go to generate revenue for these college towns and for TV as well. But yeah, I would like to see more teams in the playoff. I'd like to see somebody that's ranked, 10, 11, 12 have a shot to get in there and play. And if you don't make it, you don't make it. But cutting it off at 4, I don't know. I just never really been a big fan of the 14.
Do you buy into the argument that the 13th team is going to be upset if they don't get in? I think that is probably one of the most lame arguments ever.
No, I think once you get down, you 13 team, you're not going to have a number 13 that's undefeated.
Right.
You're
probably not going to have one that's
teams.
got more than one. It's got 2 losses or more.
Yeah, you going to start getting down. How do you get out of the top 10? You're probably looking at 2 losses at this point.
Now, I'll tell you what I do think. I do think that a team like Arkansas or Mississippi State or South Carolina or Kentucky, say a team like Kentucky that's undefeated right now, started the season way out of the top 25, has played their way in. If that team, let's just say for the sake of the argument, Kentucky was to beat Georgia, okay, and then played all the way up to the SEC championship game and lost to Alabama, they're out of a 14 playoff, but they're in a 12-team playoff or an 8-team playoff. They're in.
I agree with that. Yeah, they would get another shot.
So, and my point is the have-nots, and we're going to, even though they're in the SEC, we're going to call them have-nots. They have a better chance to sell the opportunity to play in the playoff with an expanded roster, with an expanded bracket as opposed to the 14 that they got now.
Yeah, give other teams a shot. What if you've got an undefeated BYU?
Yeah, yeah. Then you can put them in there, and not going to irritate anybody that says their schedule will squat. Blah blah blah.
No, but they got a shot at it. And
exactly.
And who knows? Maybe they can win it. I don't know. I doubt it, but at least they'd have a shot in an expanded playoff. So I'd be a fan of expanded playoff because 4 was never my ideal number when we went to it. I'm just going to look at it as a stepping stone that finally got us to a playoff scenario, and I'm at least excited about that.
So you think it's been they're making the case for Ohio State with 1 loss because of their schedule. Because if they end the season with a loss, they will have beaten Michigan, Michigan State, and Penn State.
I mean, that's a decent resume.
It is. Are any of those teams better than Georgia? Just on paper. I mean, I'm not a Georgia fan, but I'd say Georgia's better than those 3.
Yeah, I've not looked at the stats for all those teams. I can't tell you which of the ones is getting more passing yards and which has a better this right now. They are all ranked and are playing pretty well. So I would say if that scenario you just said played out, yes, they should be in the conversation, depending on where all the other teams lie as well. So I think, it's one of those what ifs that comes down to the moment, and then it's a decision when you got everything to look at. It's so hard midway in the season right here to look and go, well, what if this, what if that down the road? It's fun to talk about, but who knows at this point, Dave?
Have you ever this is going to be completely out of left field. Have you ever stopped to notice how much actual football is played in a 3.5, 4 hour college game?
On a televised game, how many minutes they play?
How many minutes of actual football there are?
I mean, there should be 60, right?
Yeah, but actually action, it's about 11 minutes. If you just timed the scrimmages.
Oh, I understand the question.
From whistle to whistle.
I understand.
In a 3.5, 4 hour game, you get about 11 minutes, unless maybe, you're up against 2 teams that are no huddle, hurry up, running a play every 20 seconds. You get about 11 minutes of football. So we wait 6 months for a game that lasts 4 hours for actually about 11 minutes of entertainment, and it's still as popular as it is.
Yeah, I used to tailgate at Athens for about a decade, and it was a whole weekend affair.
You certainly dressed for it.
Yeah, not just watching a game for 11, 12 minutes of contact for 3.5 hours televised at 3:30 this Saturday, 2:30 Central Time to watch Georgia play. I'm talking it started after work on Friday, which on Thursday I had prepped all my gear, got my trailer ready. Everything's ready. I'm taking the F-150, the trailer down to Athens, staying with people who live near town. We're getting up at 6:30 in the morning, going down and setting up to get your spot that we tailgated in for a decade straight, and start setting up the tailgate and getting everything, the tents and everything going, and then the music and the satellite and the TV and the games, depending on when Georgia played that day, depending on how long you tailgated or whether you came back and did a post tailgate. And that was an all-day affair. And then I didn't get home till midday, mid-afternoon on a Sunday. All of that was football weekend for me, not just to watch Georgia, but to watch other teams play as well. But you talk about sitting around for 3.5 hours for 11.5 minutes of contact. I used to eat up a whole weekend just to go to a game.
Well, and usually for me, that 6-month waiting, I can always look. I remember looking over at my son at the Rice game this year because we were trailing Rice at the half. And I looked over, we went into the locker room. I think we were down 17-14 or 17-10 or whatever it was. I looked over at Austin and I said, can you believe we waited 6 months for this? And it's already gone to hell in a handbasket in the first 30 minutes.
You never know. We talked about this at the beginning of the call and the poor mouthing and me saying, one game at a time and watch out. And this is why we really didn't get into why Auburn could beat Georgia or why Georgia will win the game. But that's it. You never know. You were saying,
why would Auburn win the game?
I watched part of the game, most of the game maybe last week on LSU. And the one thing that I saw that really concerned me is Bo Nix, the lines collapse and pockets collapse, and he scrambles out. He runs over to the right. He gets trapped again. He scrambles out again, runs all the way back to the left-hand side of the field. He gets trapped again, scrambles out again, keeping his head downfield the whole time. He's paying attention to what's going on. Finally, sees his receiver, throws a touchdown pass. And the play was completely busted. And he still found a way to beat them with his feet and get the touchdown. They went into a very difficult environment and got a win at night. It's tough to play.
You do understand that big number 99 on the defensive line is not even human, and he can outrun every linebacker on Auburn's team. So Bo Nix is not going to be doing a whole lot of scrambling.
I agree with you. Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt are
I mean, they're
could
just
be huge in stopping that.
Yeah, and they just got off the spaceship, I think.
If they contain him and he gets sacked several times and we don't allow him to run around the field and give him 18 seconds to throw the ball, like Georgia did with LSU when Burrow was there. You know, you can't give him too much time. If he doesn't have a lot of time, we'll be okay. If he has too much time, I believe that they can make strikes into our secondary, and there's going to be scoring going on. I don't think we're going to put a zero on Auburn.
Well, you know, I have a secret to stopping quarterbacks like that, and I've never seen anybody do it. And they all do the same thing. They all have different schemes to try to manipulate him over here, manipulate him over there, but they can never resist trying to pursue him at an angle. And you can't pursue those guys at an angle. You have to give him up to the line of scrimmage. You have to play those guys like you're on a kickoff, because you have to assume he's got a head full of steam coming at you. And if you, wherever he is, if you're coming at the angles or around the ends or trying to come up behind him, he's going to step up, step here, step there. But he's also looking for an opening. And if you use the sidelines as your 13th and 4th or 12th and 13th guy and just fan out down the line of scrimmage, quit trying to sack him, he'll run right to you. He ain't got a choice. And because he's going to run, you got good coverage down the field, you got him cut off at the line of scrimmage, ain't going anywhere. And I tell you what, the year that Auburn had Cam Newton, I saw that happen so many times. It got to be sickening. I'm like, why do you guys keep trying to chase him? Stop it. Make him sit there. If he sits there, he'll make a poor decision. Those guys are always better when they're moving around. If you force them to sit there and make a decision, they get to maybe the second or third read, and they don't know what to do because they're not pocket passers. And you want to pressure the pocket passers, but guys that are good on the run, let them sit there. They'll beat themselves. You won't have to do a thing.
Well, we'll certainly see on Saturday, won't we?
We'll certainly see on Saturday. All right, that's going to do it for Speaking Sports. I want to thank JR for coming in with us from Georgia on the beach. I'm going to put this week's top 25 up on the screen. We didn't have a chance to get to it, but that's all right because we're not brainiacs on it. KRTrelief.com, SNS20 is the promo code. We'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.